Well, good evening to all our viewers out there. Welcome to the second episode of the Alberta First Pension Plan online town hall. Every second Tuesday, we present and discuss the benefits of an Alberta pension plan. My name is Kerry Lambert, and I'm from the Chris and Kerry Show, and I'll be your host for this evening's town hall. Alberta First Pension Plan is a grassroots initiative of concerned Albertans who want to educate all Albertans on the benefits of an Alberta pension plan. Our goal is to collect 270,000 names and contact information. And once that's done, we will begin to collect signatures within a 90-day window and present it to our Alberta provincial government and initiate a referendum on an Alberta pension plan. And then you, Albertans, get to choose whether or not you want an Alberta pension plan or not. We are not affiliated with any political group or lobbyist group. We rely on donations and volunteers to get our message of an Alberta pension plan out to everyone. Please consider volunteering and donating at, and I'm going to throw up the website up here, and it is at albertafirstpension.ca. That's where you can go and you can find out a lot of information. We've revised the site now. We've actually got a few more pages in there dealing with sign up, our events, our links, as well as our videos. We're doing so many videos that we need a whole page just for videos. So my first guest tonight is Nicole Kimpton, and she will be discussing the need for donations for the Alberta First Pension Plan group. This is a live town hall, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. Just put 3 question marks before your questions, so they'll be flagged. And don't forget, please share, share, share. And with that, I'm now going to bring Nicole on. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
That's awesome.
And I'm kind of sweaty. It's a hot day today.
It's beautiful.
It's summer. It's finally summer in Alberta for a week.
Yeah. Well, it's Stampede, right? The only thing that
it's got to be hot.
Days is the thunderstorms.
I know. Thunderstorms at 4 o'clock. That has not happened. So for our viewers who may or may not know who you are, do you want to maybe just briefly tell us who you are and how you got involved with the Alberta First Pension?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I started with the Alberta First Pension. My name is Nicole Kimpton. I was a stay-at-home mom for a number of years, worked as a nurse before that, and then decided that I needed to stay home with my babies. Mm-hmm. And then this opportunity kind of came up because we had started hearing about the possibility of an Alberta First Pension Plan, but nobody really discussed what it meant or what we could do with it or anything like that.
Yep, that's true.
We just started a group, Mitch, Sylvestre, and I, and we kind of went on, Vicky and yourself, and we decided that we needed to get together and actually give people information about a pension and what that could mean for us to bring it back home to Alberta.
Excellent. That's great. And so what's your role with the Alberta First Pension?
I am the executive director on the board and one of the main kind of in behind the scenes. And also when we go on the road, I'm up there doing a lot of the talking with Tanner and Mitch. And
good. Yeah. Well, that's great. And so now we brought you on today because I guess there's a bit of an urgency and a bit of an urgency in terms of making this whole production, this whole referendum go forward. And in order to do that, we basically need donations.
Absolutely. So we've been trying to get creative and think of different ways that we can do funding and fundraising or having people donate. And so we came up with the idea that we should do a challenge. Okay. And so our first challenge, we're going to have sort of weekly challenges or bi-weekly challenges kind of to go alongside with the town halls. Mm-hmm. And our first challenge is just to donate $5. And that would be just a, quick $5 donation. And we need that so that we can do media. We can keep doing these town halls, things like that. Because of course there's costs in behind the scenes. And like you said, we're grassroots. So without donations, we're doing it all without anything.
You're right. And even with the Stampede, we were just talking about that, going out into the Stampede breakfast, we have a group of volunteers going out. We're handing out cards that have a QR code in order to get to the website. All that stuff costs money.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the thing about anything that we're doing. We are not government funded. We do not receive money from any level of government. We really are a grassroots organization, and it, $5. Like if you're watching this and you want to get involved, $5. hopefully that is not going to break the bank. And honestly, if there's an issue with that, then by all means. But we really want to push this forward. So on the website, we ended up just putting in a weekly challenge button. This will change depending on which week it is. And if you click on the weekly challenge here, it will take you to a page that basically says what the challenge is. This Alberta First grassroots initiative is thriving because of your support. Your financial contribution is crucial. If you want your voice to be heard in a referendum for an Alberta pension plan, we encourage you to take part in our first weekly challenge by donating $5. Our goal is to raise $2,000 in the coming week to help maintain our online presence, which includes expenses for hosting online town halls, website maintenance, promoting our cause on social media. And that is true. Even having this website costs money, right?
Absolutely.
Together, we will ensure in 2025 that we are asked what we want for our future pension plan, our pension, our choice. And the idea is that you can donate, and you can see this is like brand spanking new, fresh off the press. $0 raised so far, and that's really just because this went live 8 minutes ago. Yeah. And there will be a bar up across the top that will show where we are in terms of our progress. So hopefully, as a social experiment, I'm going to go to the end. I'm going to go back to this page at the very end of this, and let's see if we've at least got a couple of donations. So anything else that you want to bring up right now, Nicole?
No, that's everything.
Well, then that's great. Well, thank you again. And please keep watching because I'm riveted. This show is going to be amazing. And because we've got Tanner and Mitch on, and it's going to be a really fun show to do. So thanks again, Nicole, and we will see you soon. Thanks. So with that, yeah, I was just saying about, again, if you can, please donate the $5. And if you do have other questions about it, I'm just going to throw the webs or the email up here. It's just albertafirstpension@gmail.com. If you do have questions in regards to exactly what that money is doing, or the donation, or maybe you don't want to use a credit card, maybe you've got another way of doing it, send us a message. And but the goal, and then we'll compile that money into the $2,000. So that's the idea that we want to do. So the next thing that we want to bring on, of course, is we want to bring on Tanner Hnidey and Mitch Sylvestre to talk about tonight's topic. Tonight's topic is, are the LifeWorks report numbers fake? And if you don't know what I just said in terms of what is LifeWorks, what's the report, what are the numbers, we're going to be talking about that too. And we're going to be showing a video that's done. It's a CBC report. It was done in November of 2023. And it's a segment from Andrew Chang, and it's called About That. And it's an interesting watch, and you'll get to see where your CBC money is going too. So I want to at least do a little bit of rub on that. So with that, I'm going to bring on Tanner and Mitch. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey. Hi. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, and I just finished saying that I was quite toasty here. It's finally summer in Alberta, and I love it.
It's true.
My plan was eventually to move to the Caribbean, but if it stayed like this for a lot longer, I'd be here in Alberta.
The Caribbean has moved to you, it seems like. Yes, it's true.
That's today. So that's great. So I'm going to just I'm going to let Mitch talk for a minute, just in terms of where we are in terms of the Alberta First Pension. Then I want to start this video, and I want to just kind of go through it and dissect it, because Tanner and I talked about this earlier. And there's a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there in terms of, or skewed information even. They do take some numbers, but they don't actually digest them and spit them back out the way that they should be. And we want to be able to go in through that. And of course, educate our viewers in terms of what needs, whether or not they are on side in order for us to continue with an Alberta pension plan. I know what my point of view is, and I know what you guys are, but in the end, it's going to end up being what Albertans and our viewers are interested in. We did have a question. Before I jump into that, though, I wanted to make this a little bit live here. Somebody said, Darlene asked, I hope registering for the town hall doesn't mean I'm putting my name forward. No, it doesn't. All it is you're just watching this. You can decide whether or not you want to put your name forward in terms of a sign up. But here's the thing, the important thing, and Mitch will agree with me on this one. this is not about saying yes immediately. What we want to do is we want to get a list of names and contact information so that we have a group of people that are able to put this towards a referendum. You may be against it or you may be for it. Ideally, we want you to be for it, but we want your voice heard, and we need 270,000 voices in order to get that going, right? So with that, I hope that makes sense to you, Darlene. So Mitch, did you want to maybe talk a little bit about where we are or what we're doing in terms of the Alberta First Pension?
Yeah, certainly. You know what? Where we are is actually we've done a lot of town halls probably between 60 and 75 of them. I don't know how many we've done. I've done 50 plus myself. So what we're seeing a very clear path. People absolutely, once they understand what's going on, think this is a very good deal. There's no question in my mind or our minds that this is a very good deal for Alberta. Our biggest problem is getting this in front of enough people. Once we get it in front of people, they all understand that this is good for Alberta and it's good for Albertans. We had an interesting event happen to us at the breakfast. Kerry and I were actually standing in line, and there was one lone protester there, and he had a sign saying, "Keep your hands off our pension." And we found that was pretty interesting, but the security guards kind of got him and they stood him right beside us. And my question to him was, do you think that the pension is better off with those people that are actually in Ottawa, those criminals over there, which are actually stealing our money right in front of us, and ethics violation after ethics violation after ethics violation? We're not making that up. So half of the problem is, wouldn't we be better off to keep our money here, or we could keep a better eye on it? And we absolutely could. So where are we with the Alberta First Pension? We have a lot of signatures already. A lot of people we're seeing much interest from CA boards, from government people. We see the opportunity for Albertans to earn much more pension money and for it to be a benefit to the government of Alberta. An asset of the size that we're talking about, the $335 billion asset, makes Alberta a richer place, makes Alberta a much better, if you have funding, you have options. And the other thing it does is it takes that money away from people that are consciously and continually attacking our province. And I think that that's important. I think decentralizing government right now, with what we're seeing, should be a goal for all of us. So actually, I think that's pretty much where we're at. We're continuing to do what we do. We spent 3 days at the Stampede. We booked a bunch more meetings. So you know what? Away we go. We're just going to continue to do it until we succeed, and we will. We will definitely succeed.
That's great. These, just so our viewers do know, this is a series that we're doing on the pension plan, and I think it's important to actually, as much as this is a live webinar, you can ask questions, but eventually this series will be done. We're going to try and do 6, 8, 12 episodes, whatever it takes in order to kind of exhaust the questions, and then we really hope that people will go back and rewatch all these. And hopefully it'll fit all the pieces in the puzzle for you, and it should answer 95 to 99% of the questions for sure. And so that's our goal with these webinars. And again, the idea behind the webinars is it's summer, people are busy, and it's just difficult to get people into a room, especially a hot room in a community hall right now. And so if we are able to do this and watch whenever you can, then that is the goal of these. So with that, I think, are you okay with me just starting this video, Tanner?
Giver, absolutely.
So we want to keep these videos or our town halls to about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. We're already 15 minutes in, and we really haven't had a big conversation yet. So what I want to do is I want to show this video again. It's from a CBC report done in November 2023, and it's a segment called About That with Andrew Chang. That segment is about 12 minutes long. There's a lot of funny little redundancies in which we'll probably talk a little bit more about it as the video goes on. But let's just jump into this and we'll just listen, and then we'll stop it. And whenever Mitch or Tanner wants to stop something, or I'll stop it, and we'll just make some comments on it. So let's get this rolling.
Who would have thought math could be so controversial or delicious? If this pizza is the totality of Canada's pension plan assets, and Alberta comes along and says, we want out, we're taking what's ours and leaving, the amount of pizza that would be left for the whole rest of Canada would be about this much. And I say about because it's actually a little less. The Alberta government would take about half the pizza and a little bit of that slice, about 53% of the CPP's assets. And I can tell you right now, they're not 53% of the population. So how did they arrive at this number? And in the second half of this explainer, does that number make sense?
We've got a formula.
I'm just going to stop that for a second. So we wasted a minute describing what 53% is for the population out there that don't know basic math. So I'm not really happy with the way the video started, but I wanted to show you that that's basically what the funding is the government is spending your money on. And chances are, in Andrew's defense, he was probably given a 12-minute segment and he probably needed some filler. So that's probably what he ended up doing. So I'm gonna continue on with this because this part is actually pretty good, because this is the statement from Danielle Smith
For how we would be able to do the transfer of assets. So this is just a very factual report.
Before I explain how they plucked 53% or $334 billion seemingly out of thin air, let me address one very simple point, that yes, they are allowed to pack up their bags and take what's theirs in order to start their own fund.
So basically, the CPP Act was formed in 1965, and it articulated that the provinces, when they came together to form the CPP, they did have the options to leave it.
That is Bonnie Jean McDonald, by the way. She's an actuary who has spent her entire career studying aging, finances, and pensions.
and another 15 seconds explaining what an actuary is. So I'm sorry if I'm coming off a little harsh on this, but I really just wanted to get to the meat and the potatoes of this interview.
And she will be back. So yeah, this is all laid out in the Canada Pension Plan Act, which, yes, I have spent hours of my life staring at so that I can take you exactly to the spot that matters. Section 113, which details exactly how a province determines what's theirs when leaving the CPP to start their own pension fund, which, by the way, has never been done before. Quebec has its own pension plan, yes, but that's because it never joined the CPP in the first place. The idea of Alberta leaving, totally uncharted territory. So
we can stop there, Kerry, for a minute.
Yeah, let's have a comment.
I was going to say it's so typical for all of these commentators and all of these pseudo bureaucrats to try and insinuate in our minds that something shouldn't be attempted because it's never been attempted before. That just irritates me. Like that just drives me up a wall. It's like these commentators go, well, we've lived in this status quo, in this case, since the 60s. So why leave it? It's like, why advance anywhere, I guess. You know what's funny is that these same again, pseudo bureaucrats who talk about keeping things exactly the way that they are at the same time also progressives. Like they want to completely radically transform Canada into something that it's not supposed to be. Same with Alberta. Well, at the same moment, they go, oh, but by the way, don't change anything about, in this case, the CPP or other matters of economics. It's the weirdest paradox, unless, of course, your objective is not to see, in this case, Alberta flourish, which it's not. So everything he said so far is correct, right? Like we do have the legal right to leave the CPP. It's never happened before in a province, true. But the insinuation that therefore it's something stupid is nonsense. There's no argument at all.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's continue then if there's no other comments.
Alberta commissioned a company called LifeWorks to chart those waters. First of all, by reading the CPP Act. And their interpretation, yes, Alberta gets money, and oh boy, does it ever get a lot of money. $334 billion of a pot that's around $530 billion today. So here's how that works according to this interpretation of the federal legislation.
So for those that are watching, I ended up just posting the LifeWorks report in the comments, and unfortunately, it looks like on YouTube it was broken up to a couple of pieces. So I may end up just reposting that separately. But no matter what, I'm trying to do things live so that you can at least have that information as it's shown, and then I'll compile and put a big list of comments of any links that are needed. So.
So here's the pot of gold totaling about 530 billion with a B dollars. To figure out what Alberta is entitled to, it's allowed to calculate two things. First of all of the money that Albertans have ever contributed to the pot. So whenever you get your paycheck, there are deductions, right? Last year, if you were employed, you paid a percentage of your pensionable earnings into the CPP, and your employer matched that. So if you take the sum total of what, let me use red here, if you take the sum total of what all Albertans have chipped in, working Albertans, since 1966, when we all basically started contributing, that's a big chunk of money, about $163 billion over about half a century, and they want it back. But what's more, for 50 plus years, that money wasn't just sitting between some couch cushions, right? That money was making money, being invested. And so, according to the LifeWorks study, Albertans should get those profits back too. All of those years of compound interest on $163 billion, Alberta is owed all of that. Now, of course, Albertans were also paid out benefits, right, over these years. So they would have been drawing from the CPP actual pension dollars that would have to go back into the pot, deducted from what they paid in. But at the end of the day, this is how you arrive at Alberta's supposed take-home share of $334 billion. All the money that they put in, plus all...
Stop that there.
Stop that there. So the formula is clear. He understands that the formula is clear. I understand the formula is clear. This is a very, very important point here. The formula is clear. It wasn't designed by Alberta. They made the deal going in. Ontario was the people that wanted to make this deal because they were the big player at the time and they didn't want to get screwed. They decided to leave. The number is very clear. The number is 334 billion. That's not Alberta. They didn't put that in. The LifeWorks report was done by people that actually studied this number, did not want to release this number because this is a very big number and it's a lot of money. It's not Alberta's fault that that's the formula. However, because that is the formula, that's what Alberta is owed. So it should be very, very clear that that number is real. That number is the absolute number that they have to come out with. They'll have to break the law or break the contract to change that number. So that's what I want everybody to understand. That number is a clear number. There's no, as far as we're concerned, we're not seeing much dispute. The federal government has been late again on providing this number because they also understand that that's the correct number. Mm-hmm. So just moving forward from that number is the real number. So people from Alberta should understand that that is due to us should we choose to go get it. And that's the
okay.
Right.
Tanner, do you have any comments on that?
You know, can you switch between tabs, Kerry, easily or no? If not, that's okay. But if you can,
yes, and theory. What do you want?
Well, I actually put in the chat just a link to that actual section 113.
Okay.
That he's talking about.
Okay.
Just to show, just to show where he's getting that formula from, because Mitch is right. It's a clear formula. Everyone agrees that this is the formula. If you scroll down, Kerry, to section 2, it says amount to be paid to the government of province. There it is. Yep, there it is. So this is where the CBC pulls that calculation from, and it's accurate. So we have, when a province wants to leave the CPP, it is owed a certain sum of money from the CPP. How do we determine how much the province is owed? Well, you, in section A, take the total amount of all contributions credited to the CPP account from that province, and you add it to the part in section B of the net investment return of the investment board and all interest credited to or accrued to the credit of the Canada Pension Plan account and the additional pension plan account that is derived from the contributions referred to in paragraph A. Now that word derived is causing a bit of, what would you call it? A little bit of kerfluffa, where you have different governments arguing about what that word derived means. Even different economists are arguing about that word derived and when the CPP started investing and so on. But nevertheless, you add those two things together and then you subtract the amounts paid, this is in section C, as or on accounts of benefits. So how much has Alberta been paid, and then minus some administrative costs. So the formula is relatively easy. The wording in the formula is sloppy, and that's typical of government. If you want to go back to the video, that's perfect. It's typical of government because, well, as Mitch mentioned, it at least gives them a bit of an opening to try and maneuver around giving Alberta what it seems Alberta is owed. You see, you know it, and I know, and everyone knows that lawyers will battle this out and say, well, this word means this and that word means that. And the federal government, should Alberta leave the Canadian Pension Plan, will work its hardest to see that we get as little as possible, trying to manipulate that language. So it just goes to show that when you have your own Alberta Pension Plan, you have to make the wording so precise so that there isn't room for liberal interpretation when push comes to shove.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the video, and they do make a reference to if Alberta takes their chunk that's owed, and let's hypothetically say Ontario decides to do the same thing. When you add those two numbers together, they get over 100%, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when that shows up.
If that money being invested, less whatever they've pulled out in benefits.
So the way that the CPP Act interprets the asset transfer is that they basically take the contributions that people have made, they add on the investment return, and then they also take off any money that's gone out.
So that all sounds pretty logical, right? Alberta gets out what it put in, and because Albertans on average earn more, they have a pretty young population, lots of contributing workers, not as many collecting seniors, it makes sense that they get a larger share. Or does it?
So the LifeWorks just didn't have the data to basically do this calculation thoroughly.
So there are a couple of red flags that tell actuaries like Bonnie Jean that something is off here. Because consider this, if both Alberta and Ontario, let's say, left the pension plan and took what's owed to them using this methodology, there would literally be nothing left in the CPP. Both Alberta and Ontario are net contributors, so them taking their share leaves the rest of the country with $0, which doesn't seem right. And apparently, if you do the math for every province pulling out of the CPP and taking what's rightfully theirs, you end up needing something like 900% of what's actually in the fund today. So let's find the disconnect, starting with the idea that Alberta is entitled to all the money its money made.
Some of them.
Did you want to make any comment about that yet, Tanner?
Yeah, it's nonsense. Like, this is like, I don't like what the formula is the formula. Like, and if the government screwed that up when they drafted the legislation, when they drafted the act, that's on them. Like, the formula is clear.
And that's exactly what I would have said, is that so when they came up with this formula back in 1965, the first pensioners withdrew in 1966, and we've had the discussion already that this is really a pay-as-you-go plan, right? If $1 billion goes into the plan, chances are almost $1 billion goes out to the pensioners that need it right now, and there's only a small portion that's actually invested. But again, Alberta puts in, and we're younger, we may not have as putting more money in because of higher wages. We may not have the older population that's withdrawing. So in other words, maybe Atlantic Canada or other provinces are taking out the portion that we would be, right?
Yes.
They're also missing one thing there.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, the most important part of that formula is the fact that we work more hours.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are we richer and younger, but we work more hours. So therefore, we have a larger chunk of the pie. The idea is, so if Albertans are working more hours, then other people in Canada are not working as many hours. Therefore, we would contribute more money. The fact that we contribute more money is because we work more hours, because we're not holidaying and we're not sitting around not working. So factor that in and see if that's fair. In Alberta, we don't go on seasonal EI. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. So we tend to work more than 40 hours a week here. We have a lot of our population leave home, go live in camps, earn large amounts of money. But the price for that is they're gone away from home, and all that factors in. Everybody in the country has that option. They can come down here and work more hours and be away from home for long periods of time. And they'll see that the reason that those people get paid more money is because they're not home. And that's one of the big reasons why we over-contribute or contribute more, because that's what it takes to get the job done. You have to pay these people more money, and they have to work hours while they're there.
Well, Tanner, I was going to ask you the question, is that true that not only do we work more, but do we actually contribute more? Like, what is the average contribution per year that someone contributes? And on average, does Alberta contribute more than that?
Right. Well, so as far as what percentage of your paycheck does the CPP take? That's the same in Alberta as it is in Saskatchewan and PEI and Ontario, right? It's 5.95% of your paycheck, and then of course your employer matches that up to a certain amount of income. So that's the same. But yeah, like Mitch mentioned, because we work more and because we make more money on the average, and because we're a more work more, make more money, and earn more, or excuse me, work more, make more money, and work longer hours and so on, and we're younger, we do contribute on the average more than other provinces do per capita. Absolutely. You can't quite call it an overpayment, because it's not like we're being hammered with 20% taxes compared to Ontario, who's getting 5.95% taxes on their income check. It's just that because of our demographics, we're contributing more. And so we send about some, I don't know, 9-ish billion. It changes a little bit year to year, but 9 billion to the CPP every year. That's what we send. That's what Alberta workers contribute. And an Alberta worker is just someone whose place of employment is established in Alberta. So you can be from New Brunswick, and yet you're working here in Fort McMurray, right up in the Sands. You'd be counted as an Alberta worker because your employer is established in Alberta, even though you individually live in New Brunswick or Newfoundland or wherever it might be. You are counted as an Alberta worker in that instance. So anyway, and nevertheless, that I'm confused that he would put that on the video would put air quotes around the term what Alberta's owed, as if we're not owed something. Like, no one's disagreeing that we're owed money. We're absolutely owed money. I have noticed, I think everyone's noticed a shift in the rhetoric though lately, from pension plan. The CPP is a pension plan to the CPP is a social insurance plan. I've heard that more and more, and that seems to be more and more common. And the reason for that's pretty clear, right? Which is, when you pay into insurance, you don't expect to get any of that insurance back if you don't use it. You know, it's not like I can go to my car insurance and say, well, I didn't use my insurance this year, so I want my X number of $1,000 back, kind of thing. So by changing the rhetoric around the CPP from a pension plan to a social insurance plan, I have no doubt they're trying to make it seem like Alberta's owed nothing, but we're certainly owed money. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's continue on with the video then.
Money was actually not even invested. It was some of that money actually went to pay pensions in other provinces.
So the problem with just assuming that everything Albertans have ever contributed has just been earning investment returns for the last 50 plus years is that it's just not true. Because sometimes money goes into the fund and then immediately comes right back out to pay someone's pension, earning zero return.
Just like we were talking about the pay as you go, or pay in, pay out.
Yeah. So, sometimes is the wrong word. It's not that it sometimes goes out. It almost always goes out. Like the pension is, as you mentioned, a pay as you go system, right? Most of the money, if like almost all of the money that gets shoveled into the pension gets shoveled out as fast as it can. Yeah.
Yeah. What does it work?
The problem with that statement that he makes is that in the original formula, the formula is the money that you pay in minus the money you take out. It's got nothing to do with what the rest of Canada does.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, you're right. That's what it says.
And that's absolutely where the problem is here. The problem is that it's basically set up province by province. So if PEI contributes $6 billion a year and takes 7 out, then in actual fact, they would probably not get anything back, of course, but Alberta contributes $3 billion extra every year. So that says in the formula that you read, that the way I understood that, is that the interest that we earn on that $3 billion belongs to Alberta, and that's how you get to $335 billion over the years. It's got nothing to do with what happens anywhere else. It's what happens in each individual province.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. Like I said,
is that correct? Am I mistaken there?
No, the formula doesn't mention. The formula doesn't mention what does the financial position of other provinces look like. But this is the reason. The reason the CBC video can talk like this is, again, because of that stubborn little word "derive," and they're trying to manipulate that word to better advance the eastern position versus Alberta's. Yeah, but you begin to run into logical absurdity when you try and manipulate numbers that much.
Well, and if this was a legit, well, it is legit, but if it was a business dealing with another business and that was what was written in the contract, if you walk away from that contract, you'll get sued. There's an issue that's going to happen. And essentially that contract was written up 1965, probably not really thinking too much ahead of what was happening in 10 or 20 years, but that's neither here nor there. That's what it was written as.
In our talks, I use the expression, it's like a prenuptial agreement.
Yeah,
it's very clear. It's absolutely the way it is, and unfortunately for other parts of the country, that is the way it is, and it would be fortunate for Alberta. And we already make extensive transfer payments. Like, it's not as if Alberta doesn't pay. They don't use Alberta money to do other things. The EI is an example. We pay way more EI than we collect, and that seems to stay in general revenue. So, and we contribute another $16 billion a year from the tax base towards the rest of the country. Alberta does its share in supporting the rest of Canada already. Yeah. This is a small part of that. So
there are some good comments that Andrew makes in this, and I want to get to those too, because they are worth a good discussion too. So let's try and continue on this.
Alberta may put in $1. And if you said, okay, that dollar got investment returns over 50 years, but when in fact that dollar, half of it was used to pay for a pension over in Nova Scotia, that's why the investment return formula doesn't really work here.
The LifeWorks study actually has this chart showing the nominal rates of return on all of Alberta's share of contributions over the years. So, of course, if you add that up, you end up with a huge number, when, according to experts in the field, the actual calculation that you need to do is so much more nuanced than that. You have to track where dollars are actually going, what's being invested, what's being paid out, as opposed to just making these huge sweeping assumptions that every dollar in somehow earns compound interest for 50 years.
Just the formula itself it's not the way pension actuaries usually treat this topic.
So that's the first problem. Problem number 2 isn't about bad math, it's about bad data. The second problem stems from an admission LifeWorks actually includes in its own study. They say the benefits being drawn out of the CPP to pay Albertans, that probably only counts people who actually retire in Alberta, which means it's not counting all of those people who move to Alberta for work and become pensioners elsewhere.
If I was coming from Halifax and working in Fort Murray, it would look like in the data that they had that I was contributing in Alberta, when in fact I'm really a Nova Scotia resident.
And this happens a lot, as evidenced by Alberta's demographics. Lots of people come to the province to work. Think of every boom-bust cycle the province has ever lived through, but then they retire next door in BC, or they go back home out east. All of those out-of-province pensioners spent their most productive years contributing to the CPP under Team Alberta. So, of course, Alberta's numbers look good. Then, when it comes time to pull that money back,
I'm not sure if we want to address some of the issues with that, because it looks like what they're trying to do is basically say that if you're, no matter where you are in Canada, the money is basically being done as a CPP. We're not really counting it as money in Alberta. And when you do retire and you leave Alberta, you would basically be still collecting CPP. Now, the conversations that I've had with many people are, let's just assume every province has their own pension plan, because that might be the easiest way to think about this, right? I moved from Manitoba, I moved to Alberta, but while I was in Manitoba, I'm contributing to a Manitoba pension plan. Then I moved to Alberta, now I'm contributing to an Alberta pension plan. Then I moved to Ontario and I retire in Ontario. And now I'm collecting. Where am I collecting from? From Manitoba and from Alberta. So essentially, I would be receiving 2 checks. There is a lot of administration costs that deal with that, but essentially, I would still be getting 2 checks. Just like if it was a CPP, or if I was working in Montreal for a number of years, then moved to Alberta, I would have a CPP, a QPP, and probably an APP. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it is. Like I'm so confused by this video in these last few minutes, because what I've heard from both of these individuals is that really the law doesn't apply. Like what I'm hearing is that the CPP formula doesn't apply in this situation. The data is bad, the mathematics are bad, and so it's basically useless. So what's the point of having the law? Like if we have all of these rules for how a province is supposed to leave the Canadian pension plan, but then when it comes time for a province to do so, we say, well, actually your mathematics are wrong. The formula doesn't really work in this situation. And all your numbers that you've provided, even though it's done by an independent financial company and so on, yeah. All of those numbers actually don't work because of migration issues and immigration issues and portability and so on all across the country. It's like, well, what's the formula then? Like we've been given the right and the legal right to leave the pension if we want. It's been laid out, or there is a roadmap that tells us how to do so. But then when we try to use that roadmap, CBC and so on says, no, actually you can't do so. So it's like, what are we supposed to do? Nevertheless, the CPP is clear. Yeah, when you are working in Alberta, even if you're from Quebec, you are considered an Alberta, or wherever, Ontario, Saskatchewan, you are considered an Alberta worker and are contributing, therefore, under Alberta's numbers, right? Your CPP contributions come in as Alberta contributions. But I think it's a dubious claim to act like the majority of Albertans or Alberta workers retire in other provinces. Like you have that in some cases, of course, but a lot of people stay here. And a lot of workers are just Albertans who stay in Alberta. So while it has an effect, it certainly doesn't have an effect to the magnitude that's being told to us here.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, let's continue on here.
All of those out-of-province pensioners spent their most productive years contributing to the CPP under Team Alberta. So, of course, Alberta's numbers look good. Then, when it comes time to pull that money back out as a pension, LifeWorks says it just doesn't know how much of that to trace back to Alberta being a drain on the CPP. LifeWorks notes additional refinements may be needed for an actual final calculation to reflect the payments to individuals who migrated to or from Alberta following a retirement or who had a period of employment in Alberta.
So that's the kind of data that they wouldn't be able to capture. And because there were so many migrant workers, that could make a really huge difference to calculating this.
So the government has not come back even to say, we're looking at the numbers, but based upon such and such and our interpretation, this is where we're going to be giving you a number in May or June. They have not even come back and said anything about that, have they?
No, exactly right. And so they say the data, even with the migration issue, the data is not being made available. Well, whose fault is that? Like, again, what are companies like LifeWorks and so on supposed to do? You can't find the data. So it's presumably either government can't find the data either, in which case we're stuck, right? Like then you just have to go on as you've been because there's no data to support otherwise. Or they do have the data and they're not telling us what the truth is. So in either situation or in either case, right, it demands some sort of clarity from government. And all we've received from government is anything but clarity. It's been so opaque. They've been so muddy about the entire thing.
Yeah.
So are we to understand, and there's another thing that's not included in that. So if you work in Alberta and live in Alberta for 25 years and you move to another province, while you were working here, you were an Albertan, no matter how you slice that. And they're not going to explain to me, and that happens all the time. She referred to Fort McMurray. I mean, there's lots of people, half of Newfoundland has moved to Fort McMurray, but a large portion of those people are still there. They're still there now. We see that here. We see that right here in town in Bonneville. We see lots of people from outside of Canada that migrated here and have earned really good livings and actually stayed here. I would suggest that a very, very small portion of those people ever leave because they're customers of mine. I talk to them every day. As a matter of fact, I talked to several today. And I cannot understand really the government of Alberta or Canada absolutely knows where those paychecks were coming from.
And likewise,
for all of that kind of stuff, they have that data. There's no question.
Yeah. And I was going to basically say, even if they were workers were coming from Newfoundland, as an example, they're working here, say 6 months, they're paying taxes. Are they paying Alberta tax or are they paying Newfoundland tax?
And the other part of that is a lot of people moved from Newfoundland. They were earning $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and they got here and they're earning.
Yeah. I was actually expecting an answer from you when I was asking the question. So if you live in Newfoundland, but you end up working in Alberta, who takes the money from your taxes? Is it Alberta? It's the company that you're working in or working for in Alberta, is it not?
Tanner.
Like pertaining to CPP?
For just paying tax, just paying your provincial tax.
Well, you file, no matter, even if I work, say, in BC, I still file my income tax with
based on BC
in the province or territory in which I live.
Okay.
So in that case, I'd still file it with Alberta, but CPP in that case changes, right? Because again, the CPP rate is the same across the country. So I'm making Alberta dollars. Let's say I'm making $100,000 a year in Alberta, but I live in Newfoundland. Even if I'm working in Alberta, making $100,000, I'm going to pay, well, it's actually 5.95% of 66,000 or whatever the number is, right? Yeah. So in that case, I'm paying the same amount of money across the country, but in the CPP's eyes, it's listed as coming from an Alberta worker, an Albertan, even though I'm from Newfoundland. I'll pay my, income taxes filed with Newfoundland because that's where I reside. Right. As of year end, as of December 31st, I reside in Newfoundland. I come to work in Alberta for a couple months, but nevertheless, my tax is still there. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue on.
Alberta's contributions, but grossly understating its liabilities. Critics wonder, how can any of this be fair? Which brings us to the third and final problem. Now, this final point, I think, is so important, I don't want to muck it up. I just kind of want to let Bonnie Jean explain the whole thing, because she does it better than I could.
So the third issue is really around the fairness of this. So again, when you go and buy car insurance, you don't know if you're going to be a winner or a loser because you don't know if you're actually going to get into a car accident. So the same thing happens with pension plans. When the provinces went into the pension plan, it was hard to really know who's going to get the most out of this plan and who's going to get the least. So kind of at this point in time in saying, oh, I wish I didn't buy that lottery ticket because I didn't win, it's a little bit late in the game to go back and try to get your the money you paid for the ticket back.
I hope you caught all that, because it's an argument that sets all the numbers aside and focuses instead on the spirit within which all of the provinces, except Quebec, agreed to be part of the CPP to begin with. This idea that entering this arrangement was a way for every province to pool resources and hedge their bets. So sure, some provinces will contribute more and some less, but individually, every Canadian contributes the same percentage of their pensionable earnings. So to retroactively lump all the net contributors together and say, aha, the rest of you owe us, that can feel to some, unfair.
So again, to then...
that's not, this is a nonsensical argument. We're not saying that the rest of the country owes us anything. We're saying that we are owed what we deserve, what we put into the pension plan. Like you notice already, there's the insurance rhetoric, that this is just a game of insurance. And the insurance is you're going to get old one day and you're going to need help making ends meet. So in this case, you are forced to buy insurance, the Canadian Pension Plan. And if you get old, if you need it, then the insurance will pay you out. Very minimally, I might add, but they'll pay you out a little bit of money. But then it's not a pension plan. It's an insurance plan. So call it that. Don't call it the Canadian Pension Plan. Don't try and pull the wool over our eyes. Call it an insurance plan. Call it for what it is. No, if it's a pension plan, then we're owed money. This idea also of national unity is nonsense, right? You know, we hear often how Alberta is so selfish for wanting to start its own pension plan. Alberta is so selfish for wanting to leave the Canadian Pension Plan. And it's like, once upon a time, there was a great king, a very great king. He's a very large king. And this king traveled, as all other great kings did, across the country. He traveled by sitting on a little cushion, and then he had 4 servants pick him up with poles. You know how they used to do that? And then they'd walk around wherever he wanted. One servant in the front left corner, he held the front left portion of the pole. One day realized that he could get a job somewhere else and earn double the amount of money that he was working for the king. He could go get a job somewhere else, earn double the amount he was earning working for the king, and so he could provide for his family far better than what he was working for the king, holding up this pole as he traveled around. So the servant decides to do so. And as he's leaving the palace, the king starts shouting obscenities and talks about how selfish the servant is and how dare he leave the king without someone to hold up the left side of the pole, and how evil it was for this servant to want to provide for his family better than what he otherwise could working for the king. And it's like, who's selfish in that instance? Is it the king who's selfish, or is it the servant? And it's like, it's clearly the king. Clearly the king is selfish. And so it's like, what's the king's name? The Eastern elite. It's like, that's the Eastern Bloc. Here you have Alberta, and other provinces for that matter, holding up this mighty machine in the East. But now we have an opportunity before us to earn a better life for ourselves in our old age, and to increase the standard of living for our grandparents and our soon-to-be grandparents, and so on and so on. And so it's not selfish for us to want to do so. It is selfish for everyone else, like the CBC here, to tell us that's selfish of you to do. It's like, no, actually it's selfish for you to demand that we stay so that we can keep this crumbling structure kind of together. And even then, it looks terrible. So I completely reject that argument. I think it's garbage. It's a bad argument. Bad argument.
Okay, well, let's continue on here.
To go into a social contract and then later to say, oh no, I didn't get as much as you did. Retroactively, let's change things. That's the part that kind of I think bothers the experts.
So that's where we.
Social contract. Contract is the key word there.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is that they're.
Whoops.
She actually identifies it, that it is a contract.
Yeah.
And as per the terms of the contract, they owe us $335 billion. That's the contract.
Yeah. And we're again, it's legal for us to leave. That's written also in the contract. This is not can you imagine writing a contract with another group or another company, and you exist in that contract for a while, and then you say, well, it's time for me to leave. And the other company goes, no, we had a social contract. And you go, no, we don't actually, or we didn't. Instead, you have a contract here that says I can leave this agreement whenever I want, and it's not wrong for me to do so. So what, are you going to go to court and say, actually, judge, we had an unspoken social contract? That's not going to hold up. It's our right to leave if we wish, if we want to do so. And no appeal to pathos or ethos or any of those things can deter that legal ability to leave.
And the beauty of this contract is that it was Ontario that wrote it.
Yeah.
This isn't originating in Alberta here. This was the East that made this contract to look after themselves, and then it actually benefits Alberta, totally by accident, I'm sure, because if they had thought that it would benefit Alberta in any way, shape, or form, they would have not had it written the way it was. Yeah. So just understanding that this government and the East hasn't done Alberta many favors, if any favors, in the last 10 or 15, 20 years, 30 years, starting with the National Energy Program and going forward.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's continue on here.
We have, on the one hand, one study suggesting a formula for which the Alberta government can and should extract more than half of the country's pension plan assets. And on the other hand, we have basically the rest of the country saying, hold on, that's not all yours. But I should add, this is far from a done deal. Even Alberta's government says it's only exploring the idea and would put it to a referendum before doing anything else. And Albertans themselves are very divided on whether pulling out of the CPP is a good idea, because going it alone when times are good doesn't seem that risky. But when things go sour, risk that doesn't spread evenly can be very painful.
Once again, that was Edward Chang, CBC, about that. So what's your comment about if things went sour here in Alberta? I would imagine they could go sour across Canada. It's not like we're investing only in Alberta projects for an APP. We'd be investing all over the world, just like the CPP Investment Board would be doing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The last portion of that video, again, was nonsense. It was there's no argument there at all. What he says, is it to be insinuated that if we had our own Alberta pension plan, every single dollar would go to Alberta Oil? It's like, no. Instead, you'd have an independent pension manager or managers investing as other independent managers do right now. You'd be investing all over the world to, as was mentioned, try and mitigate risk. And so that if one investment does go sour, the other ones won't. Or if one investment goes belly up, the other investments are there to smooth out the otherwise, tumble of the otherwise rough and tough waves. So of course we agree with mitigating risk and with divesting to keep things safe and secure. But we also want to profit maximize, to earn as much money as possible for individuals who are going to retire one day. And so you have to balance out the two. The final, the comment there also about how Alberta says it's owed something, but the rest of the provinces say, well, wait a second, we're not so sure. Again, isn't lawful. Like I'm actually stunned at this entire video, because the whole commentary is trying to say the CPP Act doesn't matter, the law doesn't matter. Instead, what matters is what we, as people who are settled in the East, want. That's what matters. It doesn't matter what the law says. It doesn't matter that the law doesn't require any agreement of 7 out of 10 provinces or what might have you for Alberta to leave the CPP. That doesn't matter, they say. No, what matters is that we agree to it or not agree to it. And it's like, that isn't the law. That isn't the law. So it's a stunning video that reveals the temperature of the federal bureaucracy and champions of that bureaucracy pertaining to an Alberta pension plan. They hate the idea. They hate it, right? They despise it because they know what it would look like for Alberta and what it would look like for the rest of the country. Seeing Alberta flourish like that, it would be a devastating hit for the CPP.
Mm-hmm. So also, at the very beginning of the video, he said that Alberta should be paid 20%. That's what they said, right? Yeah. 20% of where we're at is $120 billion. Okay, so just do the math on $120 billion based on whatever historical interest rates have been, say 8%. That's $10 billion a year in interest. Our seniors collect $6 billion in interest right now. That's not including the contribution. Yeah. How safe is the Alberta Pension Plan based on that? Our economy could drop 40% and we'd still make the $6 billion payment.
Yeah.
What's the definition of a recession, Tanner? How many percentage would it have to drop to be?
Oh, yeah, it's actually over. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's over a period of months. That's what you have to.
It's not. It's like 4, 5, 6, 8%.
Yeah, and it takes. I think it's what is it? 4 quarters? Is that what it is? Anyways, a couple quarters. I think more. It has to be
quarters in a row.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It can't be a break. That's right. Yeah.
So what would happen? What would happen is if our economy went down 2 or 3 or 4%, 3 or 4 quarters in a row, that's considered a recession.
Yeah.
We are not always in recession. So even if it drops 10 or 12%, our contribution would still be 40% more than we're taking.
Yeah, you're right. We're still putting in that.
Plus, the $120 billion would be sitting there as an asset, accumulating interest in addition to that. This is the safest pension plan there could ever be. Yeah. Like, it's way safer than the CPP that's already there. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely no question Alberta would benefit tremendously, even at their 20% number, which is as small as they could possibly imagine that number being. Yeah. So moving forward, as far as being risky is concerned, Alberta Pension Plan would be the safest pension plan probably anywhere.
I'm going to jump to a couple of questions here. Sherry's asked a couple, and absolutely she should get her questions asked here. He basically said, Andrew said, basically put it that if Alberta leaves, Atlantic Canada may not get their CPP.
Yeah, well, you'd have to see, depending on how much Alberta was given from the Canadian Pension Plan, the rest of the country would see contribution rates fluctuate. So if Alberta gets, 20%, like Mitch was saying there, then the contribution rates don't fluctuate. The CPP wouldn't be as stable, obviously, as it is right now, or as secure, but the contribution rates wouldn't change. There's a cushion built into the CPP so that if there is, in this case, a disaster, Alberta leaving, it can absorb the shock of that disaster. If instead Alberta does receive its $330-some billion, then the contribution rates would have to change in the CPP for CPP contributors or those who are being taxed to keep it at a level of security that is tolerable for chief actuaries or the chief actuary and so on. But yeah,
So
right. He's
So
right.
Is that actually the case? If they had a 330, say we take $335 billion and they have, let's just for round numbers, say they had a $300 billion asset, they continue to contribute. That asset continues to would earn interest.
Yeah.
They'd have I don't know, $24 billion in interest there. They may not have to touch that principal. I don't know what the numbers are for Atlantic Canada, but whatever they contribute, that fund would still earn interest and they may not have to change anything at all. There's absolutely no reason why Atlantic Canada couldn't pull from the fund that's already there or use the interest that's already there to top up their CPP contributions or to their benefits.
Yeah.
No, and you're right. The number I get there is from Trevor Toom. I think Kerry actually did a video with it on him. But if you did decide to increase contribution rates by 1%, it would be to satisfy the current shock absorbing numbers and so on that are in the CPP right now. If you were found to be quote unquote a bit riskier, then you wouldn't have to change it presumably, or by not as much. But if you wanted to keep the same amount of stability as what security in the case of a disaster is what you have now, then you'd increase it a little bit. But either way, it's not the 20% increase kind of thing that we're hearing from other activists and so on. They make it sound like if Alberta left, the entire country with the CPP would immediately come crumbling down, which if it was the case, proves that the CPP is not as secure as they're telling us it is. Or if it's not the case, then those on the left are fear-mongering, which is the case.
Well, and the question I'm going to ask could end up being another hour-long conversation. We're not going to do that, but just in a nutshell. So we are donating CPP, but isn't there also a CPP2? And what is that CPP2 for?
Yeah, you have they call it a top-up now. So it used to be that you paid Canadian Pension Plan tax on all of your income up to a level of $66,500. It's somewhere right around there, and that was it. Once you reach that level of income and then started earning $70,000 and $80,000 kind of thing, you didn't pay CPP on that amount of income after that 66 or 68.5, whatever the number was. But that's changed now, right? Now the case is you pay that 5.95% of your income up to whatever it is, $68,000, and then your employer matches that. But then instead of being done, your contributions, now you have to pay an additional 4% of your income that is earned up to, $74,000 or right around there. So the CPP is taking more now than it's ever taken before. And then once you reach that 74,000 or 72,000 number, whatever it is, then you're done. Then then you're done contributing. So yeah, the CPP is updating its strategies and how much it's taking. They call it a top up. It's not a top up. It's we're losing. We're going top down, right? Because we're paying more money. But nevertheless, yes, they are updating their contribution rates, and they can change contribution rates if they wish, if they wanted to. They have done so before, right? Obviously, the CPP didn't start out with a 5.95% contribution rate that was matched by employers. It was much lower than that. So. They can change that at their will.
So just thinking back to that Atlantic Canada thing, there's 4 Atlantic provinces. They do not equal Alberta in population at all. And if they did, fine. the interest on the fund alone, never mind what their contribution is, would pay their entire pension fund based on the fact that Albertans get $6 billion a year in contributions to their seniors. So therefore, their net contributions could go towards paying what the rest of the country needs to top their pension fund up. So it's not a valid argument at all. The rest of the country should be fine based on the fact that they have a large fund there that will be earning interest. Yeah. But that depends what the government decides to do with that interest, which is a question that I would ask as well. That would be very important. If the fund would actually use all the money that's there to pay the seniors, I can't understand why they would have to change the contribution rate at least for Atlantic Canada.
Okay. Eileen asks, is Justin Trudeau including the CPP in the GDP? And then the second part is also, why do we need 8 satellite offices in other countries? And that's for the CPP investment board. And I agree. I mean, it does sound rather ridiculous, but I mean, it's possible that they do legitimate business and they do need satellite. I don't know. I don't know how they operate as a business, but anyways, the point being is, do you think that the current government is including the CPP in our gross domestic product?
Well, that's a good question. They certainly include it in the budget and in their debt ratios and so on, meaning they say, well, what asset has the CPP acquired? Right now it's some $630 billion. And so they count that as an asset on their books. They don't talk about the liabilities that the CPP owes Canadians. And so they skew the books. But nevertheless, they do put that on the government does put that on their asset portion of their books. Now, GDP has to do with spending. I don't particularly care for the GDP as a measure of economic growth in a country because it's concerned with spending and not production. But nevertheless, as far as I know, I think it would be separate. You would no, I think it's separate. I'll look into that. But as far as I know, it's separate because again, GDP has to do with spending. 8 satellite offices? That's a good question. If I worked for the CPP, maybe I'd know, but I don't. And so my answer is just your question. Why do we need those offices? It's a very good question.
So if Canada has the CPP and it's, again, let's just use numbers, round numbers, 600,000 or $600 billion in assets, and they've got 8 satellite offices for whatever. If we end up getting 300 of that into Alberta, would we also need satellite offices due to our investments? Like maybe we would need half the number of offices. Like, again, to me, it's kind of a moot point because we don't really know what we would be investing in. And likewise, we would have our own investment board. And you know, people have said to me, well, I don't want to give my money to AIMCO. And again, I want to quash that idea that we would be starting this idea from scratch. Like, it has never been done before. We wouldn't be giving it to the same groups, the same, we would have 3 years to put this together as Albertans. And it's not just this group of people in front of your screen here that are doing this. No, we just want the idea out there so that we get the Albertan advantage brought back to Alberta, and we're able to use this money to benefit all Albertans in terms of a pension fund.
Tanner, what's it cost to administer that fund? Is it I recall $5 billion?
Yeah, 4.4 billion.
How much is it?
4.4 billion.
So let's just say 1% of it.
That's what, 8%? 7%?
Yeah, well, no, 6 billion would be 1%. So, yeah. But no, Grant, now be careful because that number doesn't explicitly include transaction costs and other hidden fees. The CPP is very good about hiding those. And so when you look at just the explicit costs of running the fund, they go, well, we are one of the cheapest funds in the world to run relative to our asset size. But when you account for transaction cost and other costs that are hidden from the public eye, the situation changes very drastically. And we realize that the CPP becomes much more expensive to run than what they're letting on. Nevertheless, let's say it's 4.4 billion. That's the number that we're given. That's up 1,000-fold from the year 2000. 1,000-fold. It's a huge increase.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Massive.
And a couple more questions. The statement, the CPP needs to be put into the SP 500.
Well, like, as in, like, what do you mean the CPP is investing in? The CPP does invest in equities and so on. Like,
I
that,
would imagine you would have to.
yeah. And back to that question about the CPP and GDP. The CPP invests money in Canada, then it would go towards GDP because it would be stimulating the economy.
That's
So that's
true,
maybe a more accurate answer to that first point. But nevertheless, yeah, it's the CPP is a massive. It's a massive pension fund. It's huge as far as asset numbers are concerned. Considering other pensions around the world, the CPP is definitely one of the larger ones. Absolutely. But that's not to say an Alberta pension plan would be small, right? When you think of the share of asset that we are owed, the Alberta pension plan would more than hold its own as well. Yes, absolutely.
Now, I'm just going to kind of make a statement here. So I used to do military contract work back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And our contract was worth $3 billion. And then we had an extension of another $2 billion. So $5 billion. We're talking about CPP having an investment or a what do you want to call it? A big chunk of money, $600 billion. $5 billion, we couldn't even spend it. $600 billion is a number that is so large that most people cannot wrap their head around it, right? And even the interest off of that, like I said, even Mitch said, that interest would probably pay any current pension plan that is needed for any particular province for sure, right? So even if Alberta did take away half of the money, and then, of course, the argument would be, well, what happens if Ontario takes theirs or whatever? But the amount of interest on that is staggering. It's absolutely staggering.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Just a statement I wanted to say, because it really is like, we talk about $1 billion as though they're $100. Like, it's not. Like, it is so much money, you can't even spend it fast enough. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. The government tries their hardest to spend it as fast as they can.
Do. That they do. Yes, exactly. I'm going to do one more, Sherry. And if, again, we'll wrap this up. If anybody does have any last minute questions, please put them in. Probably don't even have to put the 3 question marks because I can probably find it. Sherry says, I can tell you lots of people who moved from the East Coast to work in Alberta years ago are not retiring in their home provinces. So they're not, they're moving from Nova Scotia. They're not retiring in Nova Scotia. Myself and my husband just built our retirement home in Alberta, and we have family doing the same. So again, the CBC video that basically said, we're coming to Alberta to work and then we're leaving, I don't think that's entirely true. Yeah.
Yes, or it's certainly not. You can't. An argument from silence isn't an argument. Like, they don't provide any numbers that tell us what exactly that net migration or whatever it might be is. They just make the assumption, and we're supposed to take it as true. And it's like, well, what are the numbers? Tell us if you're going to make that statement.
Yeah. So any last minute comments about anything we've talked about tonight? Again, we've got more of these episodes. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics, and hopefully we'll touch on the topic that you're most concerned about as a viewer. But any last mentions or last words for this episode?
Not from me.
Self-explanatory.
Nope. Self-explanatory. I like.
Well, that's good. That's excellent. Well, thanks again, Mitch and Tanner, and of course Nicole, who's still watching. I know she is. Thanks again for showing up on a Wednesday. I know or a Tuesday. It's summer. The nice thing about doing these webinars is people can go back and look at them. And if they do have questions, by all means, even ask the questions when we're not even live. Just ask them. We'll go back. I went back last night, looked at a couple of the questions that were posted from the previous week, and then we would address some of the issues on the Tuesday. We'll be doing the exact same thing for the next one that's on Tuesday, the July 23rd. And with that, I do want to say one more thing. Again, the people that may not have shown up right at the beginning of the video to see what was going on, we are asking you to do a task. We are asking a weekly challenge. And if you go onto our website, which is albertafirstpension.ca, I need to get it up here. There you go. Go onto our website, go up under the weekly challenge, and you will be challenged by donating $5 for basically what we do. So in educating you, we're doing a website, any print cards, any media, that is what your money is going towards. And if you want to make this happen, then we need donations, because this whole thing requires money in order to do it. So think of this as your little $5 insurance to, we were talking about that earlier. It's your $5 insurance to make sure that this happens. And that's exactly what we want. And there is a little ticker in here. Let's see what we can do. Well, we got $5 raised. Well, thank you so much for the person that did do the $5. We'll be looking at this again on the 23rd, and hopefully we are at the $2,000 point there, which is absolutely our goal. I see a couple of last comments here. Just see what you guys. Thank you for watching. And even Dave says all provinces should have their own pension plan. So very good conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned a little bit today. And with that, I'm going to say good night and go enjoy the summer, because it's Alberta. Just, you never know what's going to happen. The weather changes in 5 minutes. All right, gentlemen, you have a great night, and everybody that's viewing, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. All right. Good night.
See you.
Good night.